Mr. Foster led the way down the staircase into the basement. The temperature was still tropical. They descended into a thickening twilight. 2 doors and a passage with a double turn ensured the cellar against any possible infiltration from the day. Embryos are like photographic film, said Mr. Foster waggishly. As he pushed open the second door, they can only stand the red light. In the effect, the sluttery darkness into which students now followed him was visible and crimson, like the darkness of closed eyes in a summer afternoon. The bludgeoning flasks of row on receding row, and tier above tier of bottles glinted with innumerable rubies. Among the rubies moved the dim red spectres of women with purple eyes and symptoms of lupus. And Huns and Rattles machinery faintly stirred in air. Give him a few figures, Mr. Foster, the director, who tried talking. Mr. Foster only too happy to give them a few figures. 220 meters long, 220 meters wide, 10 high. He pointed upwards like chickens drinking, and students lifted their eyes towards the distant ceilings. 3 tiers of racks, ground floor, first gallery, second gallery, the third. The spattily steel works of the gallery above gallery faded away. In all directions into darkness, near them 3 redcoats were bustling, unloading demijohns from moving staircases. The escalator from social predestination room. Each bottle could be placed on one of 15 racks. Each rack, though could not be schemed, was conveyor traveling at a rate of 33 1/3 centimeters an hour, 267 days, 8 meters a day. 2,136 meters in all, 1 circuit of the cellar at ground level, 1 of the first gallery, half on the second, and one on the 267th morning, daylight in the decanting room, independence existence so-called. But at the interval, Mr. Foster concluded, we managed to do a lot to them. Oh, a very great deal, he laughed, was knowing and triumphant. That's the spirit I like, said the director once more. Let's walk around. You tell me everything, Mr. Foster. Mr. Foster told them the growing embryo on the bed of the pronuncium made them taste the rich blood surrogate on which it was fed. Explain why it had to be stimulated with placentin and thyroxine. Told them the corpus luteum extract. Showed them the jets at which the 12th meter from 0 to 2040 it automatically injected. Spoke those gradually increasing doses of the perpetually administered during the final 96 meters of its course. Describe the artificial matron circulation installed in every bottle at meter 112. Showed them the reservoir of blood sugar grate and centrifuge pump that kept the liquid moving over the placenta and drove it through the synthetic lung and waste product filter. Referred to the embryo's troublesome tendency to enixima. To the massive doses of hog's stomach extracted the foal's liver, with which, in consequence, had to be supplied. Showed them simple mechanisms by means of which, during the last 2 meters of every night, all embryos were simultaneously shaken to familiarity with movement. Hinted at gravity's so-called trauma of decanting. Newbered the precautions taken to minimize by suitable training of bottled embryos. Endangered Shock told them the test of sex carried out in the neighborhood of meter 200, explained by a system labeling a T for males, a circle for females who are destined to become 3 martins, a question mark, black on white ground. For of course, Mr. Foster said, in a vast majority of cases, fertility is merely a nuisance. 1 fertile ovary in 1200, that would really be quite sufficient for our purpose. That would really be quite sufficient for our purposes. But we want to have a good choice. And of course, one must always have an enormous margin of safety. So we allow as many as 30% of female embryos to develop normally. The other get a dose of male sex hormone every 24 meters. Of the rest of their course result, they are decanted as free martins. Structurally quite normal, except that they have to admit that they do have to have the slightest tendency to grow beards. But sterile, guaranteed sterile. Which brings us to at last, continued Mr. Foster. Out of the realm of mere slavish emissions of nature into the much more interesting world of human innovation, he rubbed his hands, for of course they did not want to content themselves with merely hatching out embryos any cow would do it. We also credense and condition. We decant our babies as social human beings, as alphas or esplanades, as future sewage workers he was going to say future world controllers, but correcting himself, he said future directors of hatcheries instead. The DHC acknowledged the compliment with a smile. They were passing meter 320 at rack 11. A young beta-minus mechanic was busy with a screwdriver and spanner on the blood sugrade pump and of a passing bottle. The hum of the electric motor deepened by fractions of tone as he turned the nuts down, a final twist, a glance at the revolution counter. And he was done. He moved 2 paces down the line and began the same process on the next one, reducing the number of revolutions per minute. Mr. Foster explained, the sewer grate goes around slowly. Therefore paces through the lung are known at longer intervals. Therefore give the embryos less oxygen. Nothing like oxygen shortage for keeping an embryo below par. Again, he rubbed his hands. But why do we want to keep the embryos below par? He asked, in ingenious student. Said the director, breaking the long silence. Hasn't it occurred to you that esplanade embryos must have esplanade environments as well as esplanade fertility? It evidently hasn't occurred to him that he was covered with confusion. The lower the cast, Mr. Foster said, the shorter the oxygen. The first organ affected was the brain. After that, the skeleton. At 70% of normal oxygen, you've got dwarves. At less than 70, eyeless monsters, who are no use at all, concluded Mr. Foster, whereas his voice became confidential and eager. If they could discover a technique for shortening the periodic of maturation, what a triumph, what a benefaction of society. Consider a horse, mature at 6, an elephant at 10, while at 13, a man is not yet sexually mature, and only is a fully grown man at 20. Hence, of course, that fruit was delayed development, the human intelligence. But Esplanade, said Mr. Foster, very justly, we don't need human intelligence. Didn't need and didn't get it. But the Esplane's mind was mature at 10. The Esplanade body was not fit to work till 18 long years after superfluous and wasted immaturity. If the physical development could be sped up till it was as quick, Say as it cows, what an enormous saving to the community. Enormous, murmured the students. Mr. Foster's enthusiasm was infectious. He became rather technical. He spoke of the abdominal doctrine, coordinated, which made men grow slowly, plus in general a germline mutation to go account for it. Could the effects of this germline mutation be undone? Could it be individual Esplanade embryo made a revert? By the subtle technique to normality of dogs and cows? That was the problem, and it was all but solved. Pilcondentation and mimosa have produced individuals who were sexually mature at 4 and fully grown at 6.5, a scientific triumph, but socially useless. 6-year-old men and women were too stupid to even do Esplanade work. And the process was all for nothing. Either you failed to modify at all, or else you modified the whole way. They were still trying to find the ideal compromise between adults of 20 and adults of 6. So far, without success, Mr. Foster sighed and shook his head. They were wandering through Crimson Twilight and brought them to the neighborhood of meter 170 on Rack 9. From the point on where Rack 9 was enclosed, and the bottles performed the remainder of the journey in a kind of tunnel interrupted here and there by openings 2 or 3 meters wide. Heat conditioning, said Mr. Foster. Hot tunnels alternated with cool tunnels. Coolness was weeded to discomfort the form of hard X-rays. By the time they were decanted, the embryos had horror of cold. They were predestined to emigrate to the tropics, to be the miners and accelerate silk spinners and steel workers. Later on their minds, they would be made to endorse the judgment of their bodies. We conditioned them to thrive on heat, concluded Mr. Foster. Our colleagues upstairs will teach them to love it. And that, but the director sensuously, that is the secret of happiness and virtue. Liking what you've gotta do. All conditioning aims at that. Making people like the unescapable social destiny. In a gap between 2 tunnels, a nurse was delicately probing the long, fine syringe into the gelatinous contents of passing bottles. The students and their guides stood watching her for a few moments in silence. Well, Lena, said Mr. Foster, when she at last withdrew the syringe and straightened herself up, the girl turned with a start. Once, one could see that for all the lupus and purple lines, she was uncommonly pretty. Henry, her smile flashed readily at him. A row of coral teeth. Charming, murmured the director, and giving her 2 or 3 little pats, received in exchange a rather deferential smile for himself. What are you going to give them? Asked Mr. Foster, making his tone very professional. Oh, the usual trypoid and sleeping sickness. Tropical workers start being inoculated at meter 150. With Mr. Foster explained to the students, the embryos still have gills. We immunize the fish against the future man disease. Then turning back to Lena, 10 to 5 on the roof this morning, he said, as usual. Charming, said the director once more, and with the final pat, moved away after the others. On rack 10, rows of next generation chemical workers were being trained in the toleration of lead, caustic soda, and tar chlorine. The first batch of 250 embryos, rocket plane engineers, were just passing the 1100 meter mark in rack 3. A special mechanism kept their containers in constant rotation to improve the sense of balance, Mr. Foster.